at the college, and I'm also the Democracy Commitment Coordinator. And as part of this position, we try to host campus events to try to promote civic literacy. In this semester in particular, we've been focusing on the 2024 election. As you may know, Illinois is going to host the primary on March 19th, and then we have our general election in 2024 that will have our presidential election, House of Representative races, some Senate races, and a whole bunch of statewide races as well. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Troy and the library for hosting. I'm joined by my friend and my colleague, Mary Dunkel. She's a political science professor. She's a history professor, a sociology professor, a study abroad coordinator. So thank you so much, Mary, for volunteering to participate in our second event of the morning. This is a doubleheader, first time we've ever done this. So bear with us, we may be not quite as sharp as we'd like to be because of our first event. We have a lot, I think I have like 20 pages of notes that we prepared today. So if you want to stay for 3 hours, we could talk for 3 hours. Mary was generous enough to make several slides related to the content that we prepared, but feel free to ask questions either at the end or along the way if you have them. Questions and comments are always encouraged. So a little bit of a disclaimer. You know, I said I'm the Democracy Commitment Coordinator. I always like, as a professor, I try to do the best I can to be as objective and not put my own views out there. I have biases, and one of those biases I have is I like democracy. I like that people vote, and we vote for, you know, we're a representative democracy. We vote for our elected officials, and I like those elections to matter, and the people who get the most votes, whether it's the Electoral College, should be able to take office. I like peaceful transitions of power. I don't like attempts to violently overturn the will of the people. So we're going to cover the 2024 election and how this is a really unique race. But there's clearly going to be much more attention to our former president, Donald Trump, and some of the potential threats and dangers that he may pose to our democratic system, to the rule of law, and to democracy, at least in the perspective that we have, and I think others have. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. Mary?
Yeah, no,
okay.
That's good.
So there is a lot of things about this election that make it unique. First, of course, we have a rematch of two people who have either are currently president or are former presidents. And so 1892, we had Grover Cleveland, who was the first and only president to win a second non-consecutive term. We also we also had Teddy Roosevelt, who ran for a second term non-consecutively. But this is pretty unique. And so Trump is the first three-time nominee for the Republican Party, and the first ever Republican former presidential incumbent to be renominated after losing election. And by the way, when renominated, he has not fully won the Republican nomination yet, but we fully expect that that's going to happen relatively soon. We've never had a candidate before who's facing 4 indictments, 91 felony charges. So he's essentially defendant and a candidate simultaneously. That's pretty unique. We also have Supreme Court cases that are going to be dealing whether he has complete immunity and whether he can be removed from the ballot due to the 14th Amendment due to some state cases brought by Colorado and Maine in particular. A jury of his peers found Trump guilty as a sexual abuser and found that he was liable for sexually abusing Jean Carroll, and that he owes money to because he defamed her. Donald Trump was impeached twice, so that's unique too. We've never had a president who is impeached twice, and of course he is now running again to be president. It is also worth pointing out that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are just historically unpopular candidates. If you look at their negative, the number of people who have negative feelings about them, those are at historic highs for two presidential candidates. Also, recently, February 9th and 10th ABC poll found that 86% of Americans think Biden is too old to serve another term. No matter who wins, we're going to have the oldest president of all time. They're breaking their own record. They were the two oldest presidential candidates in 2020, and now we get a rematch of these two candidates. This is also going to be the longest general election in U.S. history because Trump is going to win this Republican nomination. If he hasn't already essentially won it, he's going to win it relatively soon. Historically, we've had sometimes the candidate doesn't win the nomination and sometimes until like May or June. And so then you finally have the candidate for the two major parties who have finally emerged from their primaries and caucuses with only maybe 6 months to go. So now we've got much more time to be inundated with advertisements and campaign speeches. So you've got that to look forward to.
So much fun.
And I'm just going to stop there, but those are just some of the aspects that make this unique.
Yeah.
Certainly not the only ones.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to point out the fact that if you look at the difference between their ages, I mean, Trump is 78 and Biden is 78 and Biden's 81. And yet the perception, again, we were just talking about perception being reality in the last segment, that for many people it's the same thing, right? And so no matter what, even though there's only a few years separating them, the perception is that Trump comes across as young and vigorous and he's got a lot of vitality, and Biden comes across as kind of old and stodgy and can barely walk. Even though, again, you're only looking about 3 years difference between them, which is kind of interesting. So we've got this broken down here.
Trump won the 2016 election. I think that during his presidency, there was many people who were very happy with the way that the economy was, the way that he was president. I think some people are looking back and thinking, oh, the stock market at one point was at all-time highs. We had really low employment. All of this, of course, before the COVID-19 pandemic that really took off in the United States starting in March of 2020. Hey, nothing too terribly crazy happened until maybe the 2020 election that he attempted to overturn. But leaving that aside, hey, things were relatively okay. How bad could things get? And so one of the things that we wanted to spend our time on today is trying to help make a case of why things could be really different for a second term than they were for the first term.
Yeah.
And so these are 4 different categories that we're going to cover. That basically there's going to be fewer restraints and constraints in this checks and balance separation of power system that we have. Of course, Trump served for 4 years, so he remade, in part, the federal court system that we have. That there's fewer moderates, kind of institutionalists, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. And that we're looking at a really new federal executive department if Trump were to win a second term. And we'll explain all of the reasons why here in just a little bit.
Okay. Oop, I had the wrong one. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So one of the quotes that we pulled up here is from The Atlantic, and it's a quote taken from kind of how a Trump presidency might look in terms of the idea of fewer constraints being on executive power and some of the things that might possibly happen at the very beginning right away. So the idea of, as we mentioned, these 4 indictments, these 91 felonies that he's facing, all these cases would most likely stop, right? Because as a sitting president, he's going to claim executive privilege. He can't be charged for these while he's in office, and therefore these cases would stop immediately. The idea of, he's mentioned this many times, of giving a pardon to those who participated in the January 6, 2021 insurrection. So pardoning those who are out of prison, and maybe possibly even commuting some of the sentences of those who are still in prison. The idea of the Department of Justice being put into play against those who criticize Trump, whether that is those who are politicians who critique him, those also in the justice system who have critiqued removing them, even in the media as well, and we've got a few more quotes on that. The idea of the end of the independence of the civil service. So the idea of, one of the things that we saw in American history, Trump's favorite president looking back is Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson is known for, one of the things that he's known for is implementing the spoil system. The idea of putting in people into power who were loyal to him, who would do his bidding, who were there because basically they were loyal to the man, not to the job. Usually, like most people that are in bureaucracies, they're there no matter who's president. Whether it's a Democrat or Republican, it's kind of regardless of their political affiliations, they stay in that job at the State Department or in some of these different bureaus. The idea would be that this independence would be negated. It would be now people that were Trump loyalists that would be in these positions, which would then also have an impact on points 6 and 7. The idea of federal officials who would not carry out any of Trump's orders would be fired immediately, and probably think the most scary one for most of us is the idea of the military. That any protests that might begin as a result of some of these policies, the military would be sent into the streets of the United States, American cities, to crush some of these different protests. And as commander-in-chief, he would have the power to do that. So those are good. We just thought we'd right off the bat just kind of get you guys, just all happy and optimistic with some of these just really positive, excited, happy points. So that's number 1. We got more for you.
Yeah, and sometimes we know that what you can and can't do as president comes down to court cases. And we would be remiss if we didn't point out that, the court system as it was on January of 2017 when Trump was inaugurated is very different than the one we have today, in part because he was able to nominate and confirm so many members to our federal judiciary. A third of which, the Supreme Court, he was able to remake a third of it, right? So the 3 members on the top far left are all Trump confirmations. And so we have a 6-member Supreme Court majority for conservatives. And you may also notice that we have 54 circuit court judges and 174 district court judges that he was able to appoint during his 4-year term as well, which is really, really high for a 4-year term.
And as a side note, I know that Professor Navers's students already know this, but for those who are perhaps watching or those who are not in an American government class, if you vote for president for no other reason, you have to take this into consideration, the idea of the power that a president has with the third branch of government, of appointing federal judges, and that they're there for life. So unless they die or they resign, or the very, very unlikely event that they get impeached, although who knows in this day and age, they might start getting impeached more often, they're there for life. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, take a good look at those top 4 members of the Supreme Court. Your kids are going to inherit them because they're all in their early 50s, right. At least when they were nominated.
And more than likely, if Trump were to win re-election, the idea would be that Samuel Alito, this guy here, and Clarence Thomas, who are now the 2 senior members of the court, would most likely consider retiring under Trump's term so that he could then appoint 2 more justices to the Supreme Court, which would then leave, that would, cement it even further. So this is a slide here that we wanted to put up to give you an idea that, so in any presidential administration, people come and go, right? You have and I was trying to think in my mind yesterday, I forgot to mention this to you, Kevin, a press secretary, like Joe Biden's on his 2nd press secretary now, people do come and go in an administration. But in the Trump administration in particular, in his 4 years while he was there, he had kind of an unprecedented amount of turnover, people just kind of leaving. And so that this is kind of a list of people faces of people who left, and I forgot to open up the other link. This is while he was still president, and people who left after January 6th. Let me also open up this next one. I forgot to open up this slide here. Sorry. I knew I forgot something.
Some of the names I want to mention while she's pulling that up, in the Senate, we had we call them institutionalists, and that is, sure, they were Republicans, but they have historically always put the institution of the Senate first and kind of decorum and norms. And so I'm thinking of people like John McCain, Jeff Flake, Ben Sass, Pat Toomey, Rob Portman, Richard Shelby. These Republican senators have all moved on. They either died or they retired. And so Trump wouldn't have to worry about them anymore. John McCain in particular single-handedly stopped Trump from repealing the Affordable Care Act. As just one example. In the House of Representatives, there's been numerous changes, but just a few, like Liz Cheney Her dad was Dick Cheney, former Vice President of the United States. Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, Will Hurd, Justin Amash, Mark Sanford, just to name a few of these key people who were House of Representative Republicans who also either at times spoke out or voted against Trump.
Did you mention Mitt Romney too, also retiring?
How did I miss Mitt Romney?
Yeah, Mitt Romney's also retiring from the Senate now, and so he's another kind of moderate voice, the only Republican to vote to impeach him in the Senate. And so this is just this article here is just going to give you kind of an idea of people that sort of, and again, you're either kind of with him or you're against him. There's no middle ground, and even people that are loyal, right? Loyal up until the end, like Mike Pence was loyal up until the crowd was being incited to hang him. So these are just another group of people who basically would not be around in a second term. That were sort of voices of moderation and voices of reason. Again, people that are seen as more, it's funny, again, as the needle moves, right, you might look at them and say some of these people might seem a little bit more extreme on one end, but when push came to shove, they still were in favor of protecting the Constitution to make sure that presidential authority was not exceeded. The guardrails would be off pretty much in the next term without such people there.
A few other names, like people in the executive department, Rex Tillerson, John Kelly, John Bolton, Jim Mattis. We could go on, but like people who at times disagreed with them, it wouldn't carry out what he wanted. He's not going to surround himself with the same type of people in round two. He wants loyalists and people who are going to do exactly with what he wants and not get kind of a team of rivals. People will get to give him like alternative views and ways of looking at things.
Yeah, definitely not looking for the team of rivals. I think he had 4 press secretaries. I think he was on during his own term as well. So that's another, again, just kind of an idea of sort of okay.
So this slide, this slide, we just wanted to point out that if you look at the Republican Party, this is showing that over the last, from 2017 to 2021, Republicans who have entered the House of Representatives, looking at their scores and their votes of how conservative or liberal they are, about 60% of Republicans are now more conservative and about 40% are more liberal. So the Republican Party essentially is also being remade kind of in Trump's kind of MAGA image. And so we've got more, people who, for example, agreed with him that the election was stolen or voted to not certify the election results and things along those lines. So it isn't the same Republican Party in 2017 as it is today in 2024.
And as part of that, I want to include just in this last week or 2 weeks, in terms of the idea of stacking the deck, right, of people that would be loyalists. No one could be more loyal than appointing your daughter-in-law as the co-chair of the Republican National Committee. And so Lara Trump is married to his son, Eric Trump, and basically Trump has said that she should be nominated as co-chair of the Republican National Committee. And she basically told reporters in a quote that basically every single penny would be going towards the campaign effort. And I want to include another, and this is coming from the Huffington Post, which is definitely considered as more of a liberal publication, but it's coming from the former Republican National Chair, Michael Steele. So the voice is a credible voice, but saying that basically, why does he want someone like a Lara Trump on the inside? Well, that's to help pay his legal fees, to get people to, ordinary donors who are giving, $10, $20, whatever it might be, to basically help pay for the considerable legal fees that he pays. And he just got hit with this last week with was it $400 million that he's going to need to put down even as a bond for inflating the amount, the worth of his assets in New York. So he's got to put, even if he gets some of that money back, he's going to put that money down as bond. So his money woes are increasing. They're not decreasing. So.
Okay, so this next slide deserves a little bit of context. My comparative government class is here today, and they're somewhat familiar with this. We've been looking at this in class. So there is a book called How Democracies Die. This is a 2008 book by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt They're comparative government scholars. They have looked at democracies globally and historically of how they have declined. European democracies in the 1930s, Latin American democracies in the 1970s, and others of kind of why they have declined. And they cite this preeminent scholar, Juan Linz, who wrote this book in 1978 called The Breakdown of Democratic Regimes. And he developed this framework that they fully developed in this book that we have laid out here of essentially a framework to assess politicians and criteria that could be concerning for authoritarianism. And so they would be concerned if a candidate or an elected official tested positive on a single one of these criteria that we're going to look at here. So expressing a willingness to suspend the Constitution. Anti-democratic measures such as canceling elections, violating the Constitution, restricting voting rights. Extra-constitutional means, i.e. coup or insurrections, undermining the legitimacy of election results.
Got so much material for you here. There's so much fun stuff. Do you want to go into? I've got a couple. Yeah, I wouldn't mind showing like a clip or two here. So like about what has already happened, and we could use even stuff that happened in 2020 in terms of talking about numbers 2 and 3. Number 1, I think would be, he definitely has said this again and again. I'll show you just one quick clip of him of Trump's recent comment about wanting to be a dictator. This is from the Wall Street Journal.
Under no circumstances, you are promising America tonight, you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day 1.
Except
Look,
for?
he's going crazy. Except for day 1.
Meaning?
I want to close the border, and I want to drill.
That's not retribution.
I'm going to be, you know, he keeps, we love this guy. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day 1. We're closing the border, and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator, okay?
That sounds to me like you're going back to the policies when you were president.
Okay. So only be a dictator on day 1, just day 1 only, so everyone can breathe easily. The idea of canceling elections or violating the Constitution or restricting voting rights. The third one about extra-constitutional means, like the idea of coup or insurrection. Well, I mean, it already happened once, right? So I'm going to show you all a clip, and I'm sorry, I should have had this with me here. This is a clip from a PBS documentary that came out just a few weeks ago called Democracy on Trial. Actually, I'm not going to do this one. I'm going to skip ahead to this one at 129. So after President Trump was basically notified by his legal team, and for those of you that may recall, because this, again, seems like a lifetime ago, right? I mentioned in the last thing that we're all kind of like Dory from Finding Nemo. I feel like our memories are just so short-term because we're just inundated with constant information. It's hard to keep track of all of it. But it's hard to remember what just happened just a couple years ago. But after Trump was told basically by his own legal experts, you have lost. We have exhausted about 50 different court cases throughout the country, and by many of them by judges that we appointed. So they were judges that, you know, theoretically, if they were going to be loyal to him, they would have ruled in your favor, and they've all gone against you. You've lost the case. You're done. That's it. So I'm going to show you all a clip here of kind of what came next.
They're not tough enough.
This is Rudy Giuliani.
Or maybe, I put it another way, you're a bunch of pussies.
Sorry.
Excuse the expression.
At the end of it, Trump sees that there is so much opposition, including from his White House counsel. He understands that people would very likely resign. And so it seems that he reluctantly concludes that he's not going to declare martial law.
Instead, late that night after the meeting had broken up, the president turned to Twitter.
Statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild.
Dissatisfied with his options, Donald Trump decided to call for a large and wild crowd on Wednesday, January 6th, the day when Congress would meet to certify the electoral votes.
While he doesn't actually go ahead with martial law, he is embracing a path that is, in fact, radical anyway. He's not using the United States military, but he's summoning his own army of supporters to Washington, some of whom are known to be extremists and in some cases violent, to help him stay in office over the will of the voters.
It's Saturday, December 19th, and one of the most historic events in American history has just taken place. President Trump, in the early morning hours today, tweeted that he wants the American people to march on Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
This wildly inflammatory tweet was a bullhorn that immediately went out to some of the more violent, organized Trump supporters, the Oath Keepers.
He called us all to the Capitol and wants us to make it wild. Gentlemen, we are heading to D.C. Pack your
The Proud Boys.
It's all or nothing, patriots. Boldness and bravery is necessary.
They heard it as a message from their leader. Come to Washington.
The Will Be Wild tweet was the call in a call and response. They mobilized to come to Washington. These individuals came to Washington because Donald Trump told them to be there, because Donald Trump told them the election was rigged, because Donald Trump told them that someone was trying to take their votes away from them and silence their voices. They believed it.
This could be Trump's last stand. And it's a time when he has specifically called on his supporters to arrive in D.C.
The time for games is over. The time for action is now. Where were you when history called? Where were you when you and your children's destiny and future was on the line?
For prosecutors, that tweet, the call to march on Washington, represents a crucial step in Trump's criminal conspiracy.
Jack Smith.
Okay, I'll stop it there. There's more, but I'll stop it right there. And again, if any point in time you've got questions, please feel free to ask them. Now, we could have a whole entire discussion, and Kevin and I have discussed this many times, just the idea about, under First Amendment rules in the United States, our rules are rather lax compared to other countries. And so how do you say, well, this is his First Amendment right to say these things. Was he necessarily calling for an insurrection? Can you prove that based on his speech? And that is part of what's being debated in this particular case. But there does seem to be kind of a pretty straight line between what he asked for, and also even, I'll show a clip later on about what happened actually during the actual insurrection itself. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just, you may have recalled that line from January 6th speech that Trump gave. We fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. I think you can think to yourself, we won't go through all of these, but just kind of thinking about this framework, and does anything ring a bell that may have occurred or that may have been done that seemingly would violate one of these? And again, just testing positive on one of these would be, according to constitutional and comparative government scholars, a real red flag.
Right. Even the idea of Trump saying that CNN and NBC should have their licenses taken away because they didn't air one of his victory speeches. I mean, things of that nature that would suggest, again, an overall kind of violation of these rules.
One more thing about the undermining of legitimacy of election results. It's real easy to just pick on the most recent election, 2020. I mean, that's a pretty obvious case. But if you go back to 2016, before the election, essentially being asked whether he would abide by the results, and he was claiming for months before the 2016 that there was going to be fraud, and that he wouldn't commit to accepting the results. Even after he won the election, he lost the popular vote, but then he claimed it was a bunch of undocumented immigrants who voted, and with no proof for that, so he was still claiming fraud. In 2012, when Barack Obama defeated Mitt Romney very easily, he had a series of tweets that were reminiscent of 2020, where he said that votes were being switched from Romney to Obama, and that we should march on Washington, and that our democracy is broken, and da-da-da-da-da. So this isn't a one-off thing. This is a pattern of him not accepting election results. Real quick, go ahead, Adam.
So for the second one, we had he can't be anti-protest. So when Trump loses, he calls for protests. But when he doesn't call for protests. He says that protests, like the military, should get involved. So how do they let him get away with that? the Black Lives Matter protest happened, he sent the army in. But when he lost, he just told people to go and march, and it's going to be wild, and that's fine. Like, that's literally a call to he's calling his right-wing supporters, his extremist supporters, to come and march for no reason.
Right.
So why would they let him do that, but not let normal people protest for any other? How can the government let him get away with multiple? That should be a crime or something like that.
Yeah.
It's literally anti-protest, but when he loses, he's like calling for people to come march for him.
So the comment/question is kind of pulling out the distinction from in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020, there was massive protests, and in being frank here, rioting and looting that was occurring throughout the United States. But there was largely peaceful protests outside the White House, outside, I believe it was the White House, in the aftermath of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And so
and most of the protests were
they
peaceful.
used massive force, military, police force, and others to go after and using horses with police officers on them, the flash grenades and so forth to dispel these protests. And Trump, if you remember, had that Bible in his hand and walked across the lawn and gave a speech. Some people will call it a photo op. And so there's kind of a distinction of how protesters and people are treated in that regard versus on January 6th, where he's essentially watching them on TV and not calling any military and police officers to try to dispel what was happening on January 6th. And when you say they, it's they is us too. I mean, we are, what do the people think of this? What does Congress think of this? What does the court system think of this? And to be fair, I mean, part of the January 6th cases are still percolating through the court system, and we haven't fully resolved that issue yet of what transpired on January 6th, and he's in the process of being held accountable for that. But also, we as voters have a role in this too, of potentially holding him accountable come November. Yeah, so just, have you, and again, this is the framework from the text, from the How Democracies Die. Does the candidate describe rivals as an existential threat? Are rivals are criminals in violation of the law that disqualifies them? Those of you who may not remember 2016, if you remember kind of what he referred to Hillary Clinton, lock her up.
Crooked Hillary.
Those are the chants, because she used an email server that was private. Was apparently a reason to lock her up. But you hear him talk about the Biden crime family.
Saying that he's going to use the power of the presidency right away to go after them after he becomes president.
Do we have a good quote about the vermin?
I have it at the end,
okay,
but
we'll come back to that.
Yeah. Poisoning the blood.
Yeah, I think we can go to the next one.
Yeah. So about the toleration or encouragement of violence, which we got a lot here too, right? So we already showed you guys the clip with the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, the idea of ties to armed gangs, paramilitary forces, militias, guerrillas. And I do have another clip that I would like to show you, but one of his more famous ones was during the debate with Joe Biden in, I think it was September of 2020, where he says to the Proud Boys, he was asked a question about them, about these extremist groups, and he says, "Proud Boys, stand back and stand by." And the effect of that was, even according to the Proud Boys themselves, was that they took this as kind of a call to arms and to basically kind of waiting for his orders. And I'm going to show, I'd like to show here this idea about allies sponsored or encourage mob attack on opponents. I've got a lot there too. So I'm not sure if I want to show, maybe I'll show both clips now if that's okay with you. So we're going to go back to this is with January 6th. And this is related to when the actual January 6th insurrection was occurring, and that during it, President Trump had said that basically that Mike Pence, as vice president, had the authority to stop the counting of the ballots from happening, and that if he had the courage and he could do it, then everything would be okay. And so I'm gonna kind of go ahead here to the, where is it here? I had it. Sorry, it's further on. Sorry, give me 1 second here. Sorry, just want to make sure I'm at the exact right place because I had it before and Hutchinson, Vice President, yeah, 142. Sorry, guys.
That's the way you build the outrage over the speech, over the riot, into causes of action, into criminal charges that the special counsel knows that he can prove.
I had it written down there. Here we go.
Trying to get him to do something, trying to get him to speak out, trying to get him to stop the attack, and he won't do it.
He was enjoying this. These were his people. He loved them. And they were accomplishing something that he wanted to have accomplished, which was to delay and derail the certification of this election.
The committee saw it as evidence of what the president had been planning all along.
It says volumes about the president's intent. It suggests that the president is reluctant to call this off, that he sees his people fighting as a potentially positive thing. His own daughter is encouraging him to more forcefully stop the violence. And the fact that he does not, 4 hours after being aware of the violence, tell people to go home, really, really powerful evidence of his intent.
Now, look at what you've got now. You have protesters inside the Capitol building. The other big question is, where is the vice president?
The Secret Service rushed Pence away from the crowd.
If we lose any more time, we may lose the ability to leave.
With the Capitol overrun, the president fired off a tweet about his vice president.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country
and our Constitution.
Is that true? I'm hearing reports that Pence caved. I'm telling you, if Pence caved, we're gonna drag mother through the streets.
As that tweet goes out at 2:24 p.m., his supporters see it, and there is an intense surge in the rioting. That tweet threw fuel on the fire.
Mike Pence has betrayed the United States of America.
The mob goes down there to the Capitol and chants, "Hang Mike Pence." And they actually build a gallows out in front of the Capitol. I mean, they meant it.
I can only imagine what Mike Pence must have thought when the full weight of the betrayal must have become so palpable for him, when he must have thought, it has come to this, that the one moment as vice president where I have stood on principle, I am being treated as the enemy, and they've come for me, and the president is attacking me. Not only is he not calling to say, "Are you okay?" He's egging it on. It is an amazing moment.
At the White House, Pat Cipollone was growing concerned.
So that is the tweet was not only was it you saw people kind of bellowing out word for word on kind of bullhorns and people kind of reacting as a result. So there's evidence, video evidence, to suggest that that members of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers reacted, and others in the crowd reacted precisely to that actual tweet, and then began the calls of "Hang Mike Pence." In terms of political rivals now, or I'm sorry, of election officials, I want to kind of show another clip here, if I may, that's also related to the slide that we were just on. And this relates to what was happening in Georgia in December of 2020. And so if you recall, some of you may recall this, some of you may not, but in the state of Georgia, Trump was, because it was such a close election, there was a recount of the votes that were taking place. And again, the people that are engaged in election officials there tend to be, if it's depending on, in this case, these were Republicans that were like establishment Republicans who've been Republicans their whole lives. Many of whom had voted for Donald Trump both times in 2016 and 2020. And one in particular you're going to see here is a man by the name of Gabriel Sterling. And Gabriel Sterling got on, basically on TV, because the rhetoric in Georgia began to heat up more and more and more as Trump began to say, well, if I only have 11,000 votes more, we could swing the state of Georgia towards me. And that's all I need. Some of you may have heard this. I just need 11,000 votes. If you can get me 11,000 votes, that's what I need. So Gabriel Sterling goes on TV, and he says himself that he was not intending to do this, but basically kind of puts a call out there to President Trump to stop kind of egging on violence. And I'm going to show you kind of what happened.
It was like December 1st of 2020, about a month before January 6th.
And again, this is not a guy who's a Republican in name only. This is the guy who's a party loyalist. This is a picture of him with George H.W. Bush. He talks about the fact that he was a Republican working for the party before he could even drive. So he's very much a party loyalist. Go ahead, just a little bit forward here if I can.
Ran Republican politics as an operative and a volunteer since before I could drive a car. So yeah, I've been at it for a while.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, for an opening statement.
Mr. Sterling, thank you also for being here today. Following the 2020
Schiff.
election, in addition to your...
I remember they told me he was going to question me, and I'm like, damn it. I can't stand that guy. He irritates me to death because I think he's wrong and doesn't tell the truth a lot.
Let's take a look at what...
But I said, you know what, I'm just going to play this straight. I'm a fact witness, just answer the questions.
Donald Trump claims that there was, quote, massive voter fraud in Georgia. Mr. Sterling, that was just plain false, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Nevertheless...
I want to give some perspective for this. I was the voting system implementation manager. I was a bureaucrat of all bureaucrats, basically, at that time. No one should know who the hell I am. I just was doing my job.
Sterling was on the front line as Trump attacked the Georgia election results.
Thousands of uncounted votes discovered in Georgia counties. Big voter fraud information coming out concerning Georgia. Georgia Republicans are angry. All Republicans are angry. Get it done.
The people in Georgia are mad. They know their votes were stolen.
Georgia, of the 6 states I looked at, is a cesspool.
Georgia's probably going to be the first state I'm going to blow up, and the Secretary of State need to go with it.
Everyone must go to the capital of Georgia now. We need to see people power, and this will do it.
On the ground, tensions were mounting.
I mean, you have a whole voting population out there who still today believes that this election was stolen. And they think that, you know, some fraud happened, and that's how you end up in situations where they're threatening the election officials in Georgia.
Keep opposing the audit, and somebody in your family is going to have a very unfortunate incident. Please pray. We plan for the death of you and your family every day. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
You and your family will be killed very slowly.
It wasn't fun, I can tell you that. We were in the mix of a radicalized lie, essentially. And it just kept on escalating.
Y'all will blow your brains out, you piece of...
The threats poured into the voicemails of election officials.
Hope you're happy with the way going, because you know whose fault this is when the hits the damn fan, because you know it's coming.
We're coming after you and every mother with our Second Amendment. Enemy communist sucker, you will be served lead.
It has all gone too far. All of it. It has to stop. I had no script. In fact, I didn't realize I was going to call out the president, so I was literally saying the words out loud at the time. Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. This has to stop. We need you to step up, and if you're going to take a position of leadership, show some.
You want me to keep going or no?
No, the PowerPoint.
Yeah. So I know, like, some of the language, I kind of see like the urge to kind of almost giggle at some of this, because it seems like it's almost, because it's outrageous, right? It does seem like it's so outrageous, but you know, he wasn't the only one. There were multiple people on the receiving end of those. Yes.
A question I have about Mike Pence.
Yes.
I remember during the Republican debate, they asked all the nominees on the stage if Trump were to get the nominee, would you support it? And almost everyone raised their hand. I know Chris Christie didn't raise his hand.
Yeah.
Did Mike Pence say that he would support Trump?
I believe he did, didn't he? I think he did.
And part of that is that this generic, will you support whoever the nominee is in the general election? And so I've heard Nikki Haley talk about this. It's that it's not necessarily that they would vote for Trump, but they're trying to just say that, hey, when it comes to whoever wins our party's nomination, I will commit to supporting that person. I'm not trying to split hairs here, but yes, they essentially all raised their hand to that.
Chris Christie was the only one who said, I will not.
Because of the loyalty pledge that they were asked to sign.
Right.
Because otherwise they weren't going to get funding and they weren't going to get the debate. So they had to sign it or they weren't going to make it.
Right.
Just,
now, at this point,
just so we're hearing this on the recording, so the idea is that Republican candidates signed a loyalty pledge indicating that they would agree to support the eventual nominee no matter who it is. So that's why these questions in a debate about raising your hand if you would support Donald Trump get a little tricky for them because they've already signed a loyalty pledge beforehand. It's normal. The question is whether this is normal. It's normal for the Republican Party recently to be having these types of pledges. I'd have to look up the date of when this started. I don't know that I know the answer to that.
And I kind of do wonder, even though Nikki Haley said that, I kind of wonder if she ends up, because given her chances of actually making it to the convention, I still kind of wonder whether she'll actually turn around and support him. She might, but I mean, I don't really know what she has to gain out of supporting him at this point. He's gone after her husband. He said, I mean, at this, she's already been kind of rejected by MAGA world. I'll be kind of curious to see if she reneges on that as well. Okay, so another one, the idea of the readiness to curtail civil liberties, which this kind of goes along with what some of the things, there's an overlap that you might see in some of the things that we're talking about, but the idea of supporting policies that restrict civil liberties, the idea of restricting, protests and things of that nature, sick the Department of Justice on political critics or things of that nature, or the Biden family. Or the idea of praising the leaders that Trump seemed to gravitate to before and still seem to gravitate to now are the ones that tend to be more authoritarian in nature. He has high praise for people like his best one seems to be Vladimir Putin of Russia, and which we will address him again in a second, but Xi Jinping of China and Viktor Orban of Hungary. Vladimir Putin in particular, it's rather interesting because those of you who may kind of follow the news may know that there's a man by the name of Alexei Navalny, who was the kind of the #1 opposition leader to Vladimir Putin, who was mysteriously died in prison last week, again, under these mysterious circumstances. He looked fine the day before when he was on a court camera, and then somehow took a weird spill while walking back towards his cell in this prison that's in the Arctic Circle. And Trump last night compared himself to Alexei Navalny, that he is, which is rather ironic, right? The irony bells kind of ringing loudly there, that he's, Vladimir Putin put him in that prison and he died most likely under Putin's authority. But Trump is comparing himself to Alexei Navalny, who is a kind of a freedom fighter.
One, please.
Want me to go back? Yeah.
So the supporting laws or policies that restrict civil liberties, there's been a few different posts that Trump has made on Truth Social about taking away the licensing of media outlets. So this is a direct quote. Comcast, with its one-sided and vicious coverage by NBC News, in particular MSNBC, often incorrectly referred to as MSDNC, National Democratic Committee, should be investigated for its country threatening treason. I say up front openly and proudly that when I win the presidency of the United States, they and others of the lamestream media will be thoroughly scrutinized for their knowingly dishonest and corrupt coverage of people, things, and events. They are a true threat to democracy and are in fact the enemy of the people. The fake news media should pay a big price for what they have done to our once great country. September 24th.
So we wanted to include in this, the name is not on here, but the gentleman's name, who was actually a Democratic operative in 1968, who wrote an op-ed in the New Republic talking about what this Trump presidency would mean for Russia and Israel. And for those who are like, I hate to read quotes, to people because you can see it in front of you, but just to kind of point out a few things. The idea of, handing Ukraine to Putin, giving Israel a total free hand to kill as many Palestinians as it can. He's already vowed to wage a war against communist, Marxist, fascists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he wrote this op-ed to basically say that, it's easy to criticize the government that's currently in power. So in this case, he's talking about Biden, but he's saying that would just end up emboldening a Trump presidency and what those implications then would have for foreign policy. And these would be disastrous foreign policy results. So if you think that Biden, in other words, if you think that Biden's bad on these issues, Trump would be worse in this view. Anything you want to add to this one?
No, I think the next slide, we were just going to talk a little bit about, we can't fully predict, of course, what exactly Trump's foreign policy would be round two in the second administration. We can extrapolate based on what happened in the first administration and some statements that he's made. But in particular, it seems like this long-term, like from 1948, this organization of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, where it's essentially almost all of Europe, Canada, and the United States that has been combined alliance for collective security. Trump has threatened to leave that long-term alliance. Recently he even had that statement about encouraging Russia to invade NATO countries that haven't spent at least 2% of their GDP on military spending. It seems pretty clear that Trump would not want to continue supporting Ukraine and essentially cede Ukraine to Putin and Russia.
And if I could jump into something regarding NATO, which is interesting. So ironically, Trump brings this line up a lot about NATO, people not paying their fair share, et cetera, et cetera. The only time that the NATO charter has ever actually been invoked, the idea of protecting the idea of NATO, right, is collective defense, right? I mean, we'll protect the weaker members. We all protect one another in case one of us is attacked. The only country that's ever had actually been invoked for Article 5 when this has happened was the U.S. on September 11th. So other members of NATO have come to the U.S.'s defense in the past when we were attacked on September 11th. So it's kind of ironic that that he kind of has this rhetoric. And it doesn't mean to say that there are no issues with NATO whatsoever. But this idea of just this quote last week of saying that, well, if I'll actually encourage Vladimir Putin to invade these guys if they don't pay their fair share. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's an important context. And with regards to tariffs, it's a tax. This sounds good to a lot of people. Like, hey, yeah, China's selling goods to the United States at a really reduced price. Let's tax that to make it more competitive for United States exports and things that we produce in the United States. But this, of course, when you tax another country's goods, they're going to retaliate and do the same. And so the concern is that the costs of all goods and services are going to go up for consumers globally. This could have a real negative impact on the economy. And again, just kind of thinking about winners and losers in terms of countries. And I think that if you're China and Russia, these are two states that have been lectured by the United States for several decades on how they need to be more democratic. And how the United States has got it all figured out with democracy and our open economy. And if they haven't done so already, Trump's always got this quote of other countries are laughing at us. But if you look at kind of the spectacle of the United States in recent years and our elections and January 6th, and the list goes on and on, I don't know that this is the model of democracy that is exactly going to be a selling point for a lot of other countries to borrow. And so if you're thinking about states that are more authoritarian, we've definitely seen a rise of states in the last decade and a half. The number of states in the world that are authoritarian have increased. The states that are considered democracy have decreased. And that's probably a trend that's going to continue.
And I absolutely would anticipate, to jump in here regarding Russia, that this would benefit Vladimir Putin tremendously. I would not at all be surprised if, with this, that he's emboldened enough to kind of start to expand his reach and to actually go. It would not shock me at all if he were to attack a NATO allied country. Not at all. because he just keeps kind of testing the waters little by little. And I'm not trying to get into like any kind of like a Hitler comparison, because that's always such a tired trope, and it doesn't, it's usually never relevant. But I definitely think that Vladimir Putin, if Trump was in office, would be, it would work it would work to his advantage 1,000%. He would be testing the waters for sure. So Poland, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say Poland, Latvia, all those countries would be endangered.
We spent a lot of time in the last session thinking about, who Netanyahu and Israel might prefer to be U.S. president, and I think there's a pretty strong case to be made that Netanyahu would prefer Trump, and that there would be less pressure. I know for many Americans, there's not enough pressure on Israel and Netanyahu from the United States. But I think there's legitimate reasons to be thinking about whether, Netanyahu and Israel, who they might prefer to be U.S. president. So, we want to save the last 15 minutes for questions and comments. We've been talking at you or showing clips at you for about an hour. So at this point, we'd like to turn it over to you and see what kind of reactions, thoughts, questions, concerns, ideas you have about the 2024 election. Yeah, please, if you don't mind taking a second here to have the microphone, we're just so everybody can hear it.
Can we talk about how, like you said, the guardrails of Donald Trump since the 2024 election have also been scaled off due to violence, like the email messages. I'm pretty sure I forgot who it was, but one of the spokesperson for Donald Trump, she spoke against her, and she was like, "Oh, you should have been with Tom. Now you finna get sexual assaulted." We seen that in one of the documentaries that you put on in class.
Yeah.
So I think that's also pretty interesting, since he kind of, the guardrails have been, folded by his, I won't say military, but by his supporters and the violence that he promoted, which allowed him to get more power involved and way more radical views and position out there now, which I think is pretty harmful. That's it.
Yeah, Kavante, great question and comments. So just to kind of reiterate that one, the way that threats of political violence can pressure what would be kind of checks and balance, what could be leaders speaking out against. And so a couple of examples. There's a documentary, PBS Frontline Politics, Lies and Democracy, and they talk about how, as just one example, Lindsey Graham, who's a senator of South Carolina, after January 6th, he basically said, enough's enough, I'm out, don't count on me anymore. And then they show, essentially Trump supporters threatening him in airports and public places, despite him having a bunch of security around him, and kind of making the case that why wouldn't senators vote in the second impeachment after January 6th, vote to remove him from office? Mm-hmm. It was because of death threats. It was because of threats to their family. Mm-hmm. We saw a glimpse of this in this most recent documentary, election workers. There's a host of other election workers. There was a 60 Minutes clip this last week of electors Republican electors in Wisconsin that were threatened. Even just think about academics, events like this. You're asking critical questions. Who knows what's going to happen? These types of events are on YouTube. So people speak out, they say things, they could be, threatened. And it could just be, people who have no legitimate concern, like they're not actually going to carry it out. But I think it creates kind of a spiral of silence where people are afraid to do the right thing, to speak out because of concerns for their safety. And
even the gentleman who worked for Fox News, who on the election desk, who called Arizona for Biden that night. He was there working for Fox News and just did the numbers. He's like, this is the math and this is what I'm projecting. And so Fox News was the first network to call it for Biden. And he was put under enormous pressure and also death threats as well and is now basically no longer, he was fired from Fox News after that because of just simply stating that this was the reality. And for sticking by his numbers. And it's interesting because I think a lot of it comes down to character as well, right? Because you mentioned Lindsey Graham. Another clip I had kind of earmarked to show was with Liz Cheney. That Liz Cheney was the daughter of Dick Cheney, who was the one of two Republicans on the January 6th committee. And for her, it was kind of this watershed moment. January 6th it reminded her of seeing Mike Pence being evacuated out of, or they tried to evacuate out of the Capitol, reminded her of seeing her dad on September 11th taking shelter. And so for her, it kind of made her go the other way. So for Lindsey Graham, he was too scared to kind of speak out, but Liz Cheney kind of went the opposite way, knowing that it was going to risk her career as a congresswoman, and also get the enormous amounts of death threats that she has gotten since then as well. So it's interesting to kind of see her go on like these late night talk shows that would be seen as like things that she would never have done in the past, and now she's kind of a media darling on the left because just for simply speaking the truth.
While you're thinking of another question, please raise your hand if you have a question or comment. Yeah. Liz Cheney was the lead defender of Trump in this first impeachment trial. Mm-hmm. If you forget what that impeachment was about, Trump pressuring the president of Ukraine to essentially dig up dirt on the Biden family before they received the military aid that Congress had appropriated them. But Liz Cheney, the stalwart Republican, was the lead member of Congress defending Trump in that first impeachment trial. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take long to get turned against.
A question I have is, we obviously saw how Trump reacted to our allies like Canada, the UK, and France, acknowledging as Joe Biden as the winner of the 2020 election. Do you think Trump will somewhat not associate himself with those countries just because they acknowledge as Joe Biden as the winner of the 2020 election? And we obviously saw what happened to other Republicans when they acknowledged Biden as the winner.
Mm-hmm. You mean when they acknowledged him in 2020, or if they acknowledge him in 2024 as well?
No, honestly, both, honestly.
Yeah.
So if Trump wins in 2024, how will he treat allies and others who acknowledged Biden winning the 2020 election? And again, like all of this, it's speculation. But one thing I think is really different for Trump in 2024 versus 2020 I'm sorry, 2016 when he won, is the revenge and the vengeance and the settling of scores. And I know from some people's vantage point, everybody's out to get him, the media's out to get him, the courts are out to get him, the Democrats are trying to remove him from the ballot and all of this. And I hear that, or I understand those arguments. But for somebody who is under 91 felony charges and 4 indictments, and this will be a different presidency for those reasons of revenge and targeting he keeps, I don't want to steal Deion Sanders' line, but he has the receipts. He is going to settle the score. And I don't know how that exactly looks. But I just say it because I think it's important for us to be aware, clear-eyed, of what this could really look like come 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris Christie talked about this idea. Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a couple questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
So in 2020, we saw a lot of people vote just for the sake of voting Donald Trump out of office, not necessarily in support of Joe Biden. We also saw a lot of organizations and brands kind of market voting and trying to get people to register to vote. I'm wondering in November if you forecast that happening again, and does Biden's general disapproval from the people kind of have an effect on that?
Does Biden, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Joe Biden is not very popular, so I'm wondering if come the election cycle in 2024 in November, if like in 2020, so there was a lot of push to get people to register to vote and go out and vote, not necessarily in support of Joe Biden, but against Donald Trump.
Donald Trump,
I'm asking if you see that happening again in November.
Might that happen again? Yeah. Well, so a couple of things. One thing I will say is that their ground game is better than it was in previous elections, which is a little bit, that bodes well for him. And again, I don't know what you think about this, but we still have a few months, we're 7 months away, right? We still have some time before the election. But I wouldn't, my guess is, I actually just lost my train of thought. It went right out of my head. I had a steady train of thought. Yeah, I'll come back to it.
I have real concerns about 2024 for Democrats. I think the number of third parties, candidacies, is going to be a real problem for Democrats. Cornell West, I think, has a pretty good showing. I think Kennedy as an independent or third-party candidate, Green Party candidates, all of these, we're talking, in the last section we talked about 45,000 votes spread across 3 states is how Joe Biden became the president in 2020. About 11,000 votes in Georgia and Arizona, and about twice that in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That's how he won. So it doesn't take much of a third-party support. You could go back to 2016 and look at third-party candidates that got 100,000 votes that hurt Hillary Clinton in those same states. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we also talked about in the first section, and maybe a little bit today too, in this section about Israel and Palestine. It is very clear that many young people, many Arab Americans are very upset with the way that this war has been playing out and the devastation that's happened in Gaza and even the West Bank. And so if voters stay home, if voters vote for third party, if young people are just, and left-leaning activists are just alienated and feeling like there wasn't enough change that they were hoping for in 2020 under Biden, there's many reasons to be concerned for Democrats.
Sorry, my thought left me, but now it's back. Sorry. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think we still have a lot of time, and I think that, we were talking about before about this sort of collective amnesia that we all have about the Trump presidency. But the more Trump can't help himself. He tried to be disciplined for a little while, and he was on message. And when he's on message, he does pretty well. But he just can't stay on message. He just can't help being Trump. And the more Trump is Trump, and I think the more things that he says out loud and says vocally, and again, there's a lot of time between now and November. I think that the more people are going to get reminded of what happened. And I think there's a good chance of even people who are Democrats who are disaffected and who are kind of angry about some of the things that are happening might kind of circling the wagons and coming home and saying, okay, well, what's worse? Is the alternative, is this better for us ultimately? So I think that there's a pretty good, I'm trying to be a little bit more optimistic and say that I think there's a pretty good chance that, that Democrats might, will come home.
Yeah, another question.
So my question is, why do we always not hold people to the same standards? So when Trump started praising Putin or Xi Jinping of China, we didn't say anything. We started backlashing him in the media, all went against Trump. But when he talks about Saudi Arabia and how they're a good country and they help with our economy, even though Saudi Arabia is farthest thing from a democracy, even worse than Russia, worse than China, we don't do anything. We don't say anything. But when it's about Russia, like our supposed enemies, oh, that's wrong. But when it's about Saudi Arabia or more authoritarian regimes, we don't say anything. I feel like we need to hold people to a certain standard and that the media should, as Trump said, I agree with him at that point, even though I don't agree with all the things he said, that the media should be, something should happen with the media because they're all so one-sided. Even with the Israel-Palestine situation, they're very heavily sided with Israel. So it's like...
So when you say media, what do you mean by that?
Like the Fox News, CNN News, these New York Times,
so
all these.
Media.
Yeah, with the words they use. Like when a 6-year-old Palestinian girl was shot in the West Bank, she was literally shot in the head in the back of a car. They were like, 6-year-old gun bullet was found in like, just say she was shot. Like, you don't need to say all that. But when it's an Israeli or any other country, I don't care about Israel, they're like, oh, shot and killed. It's like the wording and what they do, what they place, how they post to what people, it's really different and how people perspective because not everyone knows what's going on with the information that we have as political scientists, you could say.
And I think part of the issue of that comes in the fact that we do have a corporatized media, right? We don't have a media that is, the newsroom used to initially be like, back in the day, the idea was supposed to be that it was just a public service, right? So it was just there to be informative for people. And then in the 80s, things changed, and then it became basically corporatized, and it's there to make money. So the idea, and that's, and I know you're talking about something separate as well, but it's connected. So it's the idea of it being a generator for money and ad revenue, and so it's got to get ratings, right? So that's one kind of segment of it, and I'm not sure if that's necessarily something that has, whether Trump's there or not, that's still going to be the case. You have to search out, because when we use the term media altogether, I get a little, because there's a lot, right? That's a very large encompassing word. So I think that's why I kind of asked about, to be a little bit more specific about what you mean when you say that. In terms of like the American media, I share there are some definite concerns about some of the corporatized wording that's used with Israel and Palestine. I think it's gotten a little bit better. Like I watched like ABC, and it's gotten definitely better than it was, let's say, in October. But I don't know if necessarily the solution would be to have what Trump's solutions are. because that's not going to be what you're looking for. That's not going to be reform. The way to reform a corporation is basically to like not watch what they're putting out, change the channel, right? To that's the power of the purse sort of thing. But if you go by what Trump is saying, he's going to actually use like political power to actually jail. But I mean that's not what we want either, right? That's a total violation of the First Amendment.
He'd probably use the media for his, like he'd change it
Absolutely.
from against him to
Yeah,
with him.
as a
So
mouthpiece.
I'm not saying that I agree with how Trump wanted to do it. I'm just saying I agree that yes, the media needs to change. We need to do something about the media.
Right.
Because as the people, all we watch is the media, technically. All we watch is what happened, the news, everything. We need to know actual facts so we can do what we need to do for our country and make it better.
Right.
Because now, with this election coming up, this is a very hypocritical election. So we don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen to the United States of America, the number one country in the world, supposedly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Time for maybe one more question or comment? Kavanta?
I want to go back into what he said as how we kind of use Joe Biden as like a better of two evils for Trump. But now have we seen the Joe Biden reaction such as to immigrants in Israel and Palestine with him standing for Israel? And like you said, he have lost a lot of Democratic votes. How do you think Joe Biden or the Democratic Party will fear reaction to the 2024 election now that Joe Biden has kind of lost the Democratic people in a ton of ways, such as the immigrants and the migrant problem in America and Israel with the Palestine and him turning for Israel?
Say that one more time.
I think you're asking how is Joe Biden going to get kind of regain some of that credibility with like issues like immigration and migration and stuff like that. I think that in terms of the immigration issue, he already has been trying to hit that one head on by saying that he would sign any bill that kind of Congress brings to him. And if you heard about Congress, the Senate coming up with a bill that was going to address the immigration issue, and then it was end up being it's a dead on arrival in the House because basically Trump has indicated that that should be quashed. He wants to use immigration as an issue for the 2024 election. So I think that Biden is now kind of like, you're seeing sort of that pivot that's occurring where I think he's trying to kind of win back some of those voters. Professor Navarro talked about in the last one about sending kind of his emissaries out to areas like in Dearborn, Michigan to talk to Arab Americans, to try to get them kind of back on board, to not lose that constituency, whether it's too late or not, is something to be seen. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I want to also connect to my optimism and just the potential for, there is an anti-MAGA coalition that is against some of the, election denialism, the worst aspects, if you will, of kind of the Trumpism, whether it's suburban voters, whether it's females, whether it's independents, some moderates, former Republicans, or people who still are Republicans who just aren't down with that version. There's the potential to be there. Will young voters, will liberal voters kind of hold their, I don't know the best way of saying this, but like they can be frustrated with maybe the lack of change, let's say for climate change or other policies that they really want done, that they want the war in Israel and Palestine to be over. All of those concerns and issues that might make them not want to vote or vote for a third party. Can you see that this, we were trying to frame this election like first you have to put, like they say on an airplane, you got to put your own mask on first before your child. Like at first we have to have elections that are free, fair, and the winner takes office. And so before we can have policy debates and maybe have the best candidate that represents our view on every single issue, we first have to make sure that we have elections and a constitution and rule of law. This is like an existential threat to democracy. And I still think there's time for voters to understand the true implications of what this election looks like, and that you can't wait until 2028 to then get what you want on your preferred issue, because the system may be different by then. The way that elections are conducted may be different by then. And when I say different, I don't mean better.
Yeah.
So it's a fair question. And I appreciate all of you with your questions and comments and attention today. I want to thank Mary for volunteering 2.5 hours of her time to share her expertise. So thanks again for everyone for attending.
Good questions too. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, you guys. great questions, you guys. Thank you. I'm sorry.